Okay, excellent. Richard, thank you very much for joining the podcast. Thank you. And for our listeners and viewers, would you be so kind to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Richard Williams. I'm the CEO of Cornish Metals, Inc. We're a company that's listed on both the Canadian TSX Venture Exchange and London's AIM Exchange. And our flagship project is the South Crofty tin project in Cornwall, which we are moving towards completion of feasibility study and hopefully a production decision.
And you are you're floated in Canada on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and you have other assets and interests around the world. Is that right?
Yeah, so the precursor to Cornish Metals was a company called Strongbow Exploration, which I was not involved with. But that was around for a number of years, and like most explorers, certainly in North America, you tend to go through many lives. And in 2015, I was asked to join what was effectively a shell company at the time, Strongbow, and the mandate was to look for high-quality tin projects that preferably had a history of mining or could be put into production fairly quickly. And I didn't know too much about the tin world at that point. Most of my career has been focused on gold, copper, silver, lead, zinc. And after looking at many projects, certainly in the Western world, we came to realize that there weren't many good assets out there, and the standout by a long way was South Crofty. And fortunately for us at the time, the assets, the company was in administration. And so we managed to negotiate acquisition of the company, which we completed in 2016.
And you take a positive outlook on old historical mining operations. And can you just tell us about the philosophy behind that?
Well, I think, you know, there's a couple of sayings in the mining industry. One is the best place to find a new mine is next to an old mine. And, you know, if you look at Cornwall and the history of mining in Cornwall, obviously the granite that underlies much of Cornwall and pops out at Land's End and Carmen Ellis and St. Austell and Bodmin Moor and Dartmoor. There are a lot of mines associated within those granites and very close to the edges of them. And, you know, Cornwall is regarded as one of the world's great tin districts, but most of that mining took place from the 1500s right up until 1998, which is when South Crofty closed. And I think there was a prevailing view in the industry, or certainly in the market, that there wasn't much left in Cornwall, which is a complete misunderstanding. You know, I think most of the mines that were operated in the past are still in mineralization. They just closed for various reasons. Sometimes it was war, sometimes it was low tin prices. And the most recent event was the tin price collapse in 1985, which led to the closure ultimately of the entire Cornish tin mining industry. But nothing to do with running out of tin. It was more a tin price environment.
Yeah, fascinating, really. And you have you acquired South Crofty, and I believe it was off Rio Tinto. Did they at one point own it way back in the 1960s? I think my research tells.
Rio Tinto did own it right up until the tin price collapse in 1984-85.
Yes.
They also operated the nearby Wheel Jane mine, which was a tin zinc mine as well, which closed in 1992, and then South Crofty closed in 1998. After the tin price collapse, Rio Tinto sold the project. It was like a management buyout, and it then became a company called Carnan Consolidated, which operated the mine until closure in 98. And then really between 2001 and 2013, there was one company that owned the project called Base Result, and they attracted investment from a fund out of Europe called Galena Asset Management that advanced the project through some underground development. They were doing some drilling underground, but we ran into an environment between 2012 to basically 2020 which was very difficult for base metal miners. Galena couldn't raise any more money to move the project forward, which is when it ended up going into administration. And then we acquired the project, as I said, in 2016. And since that time, we've now got full planning permission to build a new process plant on site. We've got underground permission, which means we can mine within the project area. And we've got the environmental permits to dewater the mine because it is flooded today.
And how much new technology have you found to squeeze more out of this lemon? I mean, are you using, I mean, that's probably the fundamental, what you bring to the market.
Yeah, I don't think it's really, you know, as I said earlier, what was being mined at South Crofty up until its closure was basically what was in front of them, and there was no clear definition of where the mineralization was ending. So it's open along strike, which means laterally, and it's open to depth, and we don't know where the bottom of the system is. What I can tell you is that a couple of years ago there was a deep geothermal well drilled in the region down to just over 5 kilometers depth, and they were getting indications of tin mineralization at over 3 kilometers depth. So what you tend to find is tin, certainly down in Cornwall, it's got enormous vertical extent, range of mineralization. The structures that host the mineralization within South Crofty can be traced for 5, 10, 15 kilometers. So, you know, there's no reason why it doesn't continue along strike. It's more a matter of time. You know, people have been mining this project since 1592, and it operated continually for 400 years before it closed, and it's still in mineralization. So from a technology perspective, I think what we are trying to bring to the table now, it's more mining technique, a much more modern mining technique as opposed to the techniques that we used in the past. So a healthier working environment, a safer working environment. And then one of the big advances in processing has been the adoption of what's called ore sorting. So you mine the lode underground, and you know, you're always taking some waste solution in with that. And if you can separate some of that waste from the mineralization before it goes to the mill, then it means that your mill size is smaller, your energy consumption is less. What you're processing is a smaller tonnage, so you know, it makes for a much more efficient operation.
Yeah, exactly. So like your methodology has just improved as much as the technology has, methodology has. One of the biggest challenges we have in this country is our lack of investment in our peripheral areas, coastal regions, in particular in Cornwall. And what is so important or pressing at this time is how the extraction industry has an important, absolutely key role to play in what the government call levelling up. But really what it means is bringing high quality jobs for the local communities in areas that are not otherwise well served anywhere else. And Cornwall fits that bang in the middle. It's one of the lowest, poorest county in the UK per GDP per capita. It has one of the highest literary rates. It is, you know, Cornwall needs that inward investment that the extraction industry brings. Now, what that leads us to the second point is the extraction industry has so many challenges on a political point of view that that high quality, environmentally sound investments like what Cornish Metals are doing can illustrate and can bring in quality employment is like 101 leveling up. Can you tell me about what Cornish Metals is doing in terms of engagement with local community, hiring local and training the local workforce?
Sure. Look, you covered a lot of points there. Very much so from a leveling up perspective. I think we tick all of the boxes. Cornwall, Camborne and Poole, Redruth in particular, are quite impoverished areas. They really do need a significant boost to the local economy. You can see that on the high street, and I think, you know, our focus from day one has been to ensure that we try to employ locally wherever possible for all of the positions that we need to fill. And to date, we've been very successful doing that. We've grown
our team from about 8 people a year ago to around 35 full-time employees currently down at the mine site, and they all live locally in Cornwall. And that's the senior positions as well. Our chief operating officer lives in Truro, Owen Wylop. Our feasibility study manager, our mine manager, project engineer, they all live local to the mine. So there's that added motivation from their perspective to see this mine get back into production and have the impact it can have on the local population. From a local government and a county council government perspective, we've only seen positive support from the parish council, Cornwall council. When you look at, we did publish what's called a preliminary economic assessment in 2017, and for a mine of the size that we're looking at, it would create around 275 to 300 direct jobs. The average income on a mine like South Crofty would probably be double the average income for the local area. So again, you can see how positive that would be. And then there's also the so-called multiplier effect, where you look at the number of indirect jobs that are created as a result of a direct job at the mine. And the mining industry has one of the highest multiplier effects for job creation indirectly. And you see figures ranging anywhere from 4 to 8 new jobs per direct employee. So, for argument's sake, you take 300 people at the mine, you're looking at anywhere from 1,000 to 1,800 new jobs created on the supply side, which I think again would be a great boost to the local economy.
And would you ever think about floating here in on the UK markets, whereas you haven't currently floated in Toronto?
Well, we are actually listed here, so we floated. So we listed in. So I'll get a bit of a potted history here. Once we recognized the merits of South Crofty, it was apparent to us as a company that we needed to be listed in London. We needed exposure to the UK investor base. What we were seeing was strong interest from UK investors to see projects like this advance. And we did attempt 2018-19 to list, but there were a number of factors beyond our control that we just didn't get it done at that time. And then in 2020, we did a couple of things which was really the catalyst to the listing in 2021. We undertook a drill program at South Crofty to demonstrate to the market that the mineralization that was mined historically does continue deeper down in the mine, and we actually drilled some of the highest grade tin mineralization ever encountered on the mine. One of the intercepts was over 2.5 meters at over 10% tin, which is incredibly high grade. We also, through a partner, Cornish Lithium, they drilled a hole at United Downs project looking for geothermal waters that would be enriched in lithium. And as part of that drilling, they encountered some very high-grade copper and tin mineralization, which was only 100 meters below surface. So we used that event of 2020 to list the company on AIM in early 2021. We raised £8.2 million on the listing. We listed at 7p, and I think currently we're trading around 18p. So it's been, it's been a very positive journey from a UK listing perspective. And we always said that, we view Cornwall and the assets that we have very much as a development project, the flagship project, which is South Crofty. It's got, it's permitted, it's got a viable resource, it's got a long history of mining there. And then we've got the exploration assets around that. So these are other mineral rights that we own throughout Cornwall. And we always saw United Downs as one of the top 3 targets that we had. But the view within the company was when the tin price environment was supportive, we would look to raise the funding to get South Crofty moved forward as well, because all we need to do there is complete the feasibility study, dewater the mine, and make a production decision. You don't have to go through the whole exploration process of discovery, ore resource definition, all of the permitting. And we found ourselves in that environment a year ago. The tin price was very strong, tremendous demand for tin, really from the whole transition, energy transition, anything to do with electronics has tin in it. Renewable power generation, electric vehicles, computers, data storage. And we were fortunate to attract investment from a fund called Vision Blue Resources. That's headed up by Sir Mick Davis, formerly the CEO of Xstrata. So, he's grown one of the world's biggest multi-commodity mining companies in the past, and his team recognized the merits and the potential of South Crofty, and that led to their investment. So over the last year, we've been focused on putting everything in place to build a water treatment plant, start dewatering South Crofty, and move it towards a production decision.
Yeah, I think you obviously the South Crofty, if your preliminary research seems to be correct, then the wider implications are going to bring such positivity into the Cornish economy, and in particular, we can use the success to improve the political outlook for the extraction industry across the UK. And if we, fingers crossed, we get this right. If you get this right, then we can see the extraction industry becoming of greater importance in the leveling up. I say this because we are fighting ever against greater bureaucracy and greater NIMBYism across every industry. It's not just mining, but it's in housing, it's in transport. So, and new mines, for example, the coal mine up in Cumbria, a lot of the environmentalists were good reason to argue not to have a new coal mine in the UK, but they did exclude the fact that we have to produce steel for trains. So, shrinking supply chains. And I think, and that's exactly what we're doing here, what you're doing in Cornwall, and what I'm proposing, which I very much want more to happen in the UK, is we're shrinking our supply chain, which by its very nature is environmentally sound, and that will propel us to net zero. It seems so tangential. Like, why does a Cornish mining, why does it matter? Because the extraction industry in this country is at the very beginning of a long climb out of justifying its existence and showing the world why extraction industry at home is key to leveling up.
Well, I think they're all good points, but I think some of the key aspects here are to achieve, and as you said, to achieve net zero, you need to reduce your carbon footprint, and I think a big part of the kind of challenges that the mining industry faces today, especially in Western society, is education. I think a lot of people have gone through the education system just with the viewpoint that mining is bad or negative. But there's been enormous advances in health and safety in mines, environmental controls, and a project like South Crofty has the microscope on it. People will be watching to see how we perform, how responsible we are, not only to the environment, but engaging the local community and all the stakeholders, and to ensure that there's a positive outcome for all. But beyond that, I think events that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, COVID first, relationship between China, US, Taiwan, the whole situation there, and then more recently Ukraine, Russia, and really bringing into focus the importance of energy security, material security. And what you've seen over the last few years are governments around the world publishing what they call their own critical minerals lists, minerals that are important to maintain the current standard of living that we have, to achieve that net zero that everybody talks about. And the UK published its critical minerals list last July, and tin was on the list. And it's obvious if you spend an hour on Wikipedia as to why tin is on the list, because it is really the glue that holds all electronic components together. So if you've got a computer or a microchip in an electric vehicle, electrical connection anywhere, the whole Internet of Things runs because you've got tin as the solder which links everything together. And currently today, 75% of all the tin that's mined in the world comes from 3 countries, China, Myanmar, and Indonesia. And you look at Myanmar, and it's the tin mine in there is in an area of conflict. So that some of those funds from tin mining is going to fund conflict, which is not an ideal situation by any stretch of the imagination. When you look at Indonesia, most of the tin mining there is from large-scale dredging, seafloor dredging, which has a big impact on marine ecosystems. And in China, obviously, I think China's trying to bring itself forward, improve its health and safety and systems, but there is always that potential cloud out there. There's no tin production, primary tin mining in Europe. There's none in North America, and yet electronics and the electrification of the economy is at the forefront of where society needs to go today. And so the opportunity, I think, for Cornish Metals and Cornwall in general is to be a key player in that from a tin perspective. We have the potential in Cornish Metals to supply all of the UK's tin needs.
Yeah. I mean, do you think South Crofty can do that alone?
Yes. Europe's tin demand, I believe, is in the order of 70,000 tons of tin per year. So it is heavily reliant on import. If we have the potential, and we think we do, to make new discoveries in Cornwall and grow the size of the company, grow the production base, grow the resource base, we could be one of the suppliers of choice to Western society, where I think people are very keen to understand where the materials come from in the products that they own: iPhone, microwave, your TV, your computer, your electric vehicle. You don't want to be buying a commodity or a product that has gone to exploit child labor, for instance, or fund conflict. And we can tick all of those boxes. ESG has become a very prominent theme, not just in the mining industry, but any aspect of life today. And when you look at, it comes back to the leveling up side of things, certainly from a society aspect, the impact that this mine could have on the local community is very positive. From an environmental perspective, by us dewatering the mine, treating the mine water, we're actually improving the environment of the Red River, which obviously is something that everybody wants to see. And we also benefit from the long history of mining at South Crofty, which means that we can put any of the waste, i.e. the tailings, after we've processed and recovered the tin, back underground. And it'll be one of the few, if not the only, tin mine, or any mine for that matter, that can put 100% of the waste back underground, so we don't need to permit a tailings facility. So from a surface footprint perspective, South Crofty will have a very minimal impact visually on the ground.
Also access to quite a lot of talent because you have the Campbell School of Mines next door. This is excellent, Richard. So very informative. Thank you so much. I think we've done nearly 25 minutes. So, and we'll just call it, and we will watch Cornish Metals. And one day, perhaps we'd love to come down and visit South Crofty when we're allowed.
Very good. Thanks, Edward.
Richard, thank you very much. Have a very happy day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.